Just to explain the rules, Emma has just 5 minutes to interrogate Dan, so she'll know what it's like for me. Emma can only ask questions, Dan can only give answers. Emma, your time starts now.
Daniel, 9 out of 10 economists and a string of organisations have said that leaving the EU would damage the economy, would make families worse off and could cause a recession. Could you name an independent economic forecast that has said the opposite, that somehow leaving would be a benefit to the economy?
Well, 5 former chancellors are campaigning to leave. There are plenty of economists who have argued that we should leave. Gerard Lyons, Andrew Lillico, Tim Compton.
On that point, Gerard Lyons has said that although he's in favour of leaving the EU, if we were to vote to leave, for 2 years it would cause great uncertainty and that it would depress the economy. Do you agree with him?
He hasn't said that. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous.
He said that in a report.
No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. I've appeared on numerous platforms today. You're going to have to do a bit better than that. Well, no, he's strongly of the view that leaving means walking away from a declining trade bloc and being able
and he has also said that it would cause 2 years of uncertainty and depress the economy.
All these international
Patrick
bodies,
Minford, let's take Patrick Minford.
All these, hang on, he's your guy, not mine, but all of these international bodies that you're quoting, the IMF
Patrick Minford's your guy.
These are people who share the outlook, international bureaucrats like international bureaucracies. And they share the lifestyle, the tax-free, Michelin-starred, gourmandizing lifestyle, and they share the basic outlook. And they were pro-Euro, they were pro-ERM, because that's the kind of circles that they live in.
The Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies does not share that lifestyle and is widely respected across the political spectrum. They have said that by leaving, we could blow a black hole of between 20 billion and 40 billion pounds in our public finances, meaning less money for public services like the NHS. What do you say to that?
Well, they were feeding in the same basic data that they got from all these IMF, OECD type organisations.
They're an independent organisation.
Emma, if I didn't think that we would be better off as a whole, I would not be inviting viewers to make me redundant from a very well-remunerated job with huge tax-free salaries. The reason that I'm confident that I will have a job in the private sector doing something a bit more productive than regulating everyone else after Brexit is because we shouldn't be linked to the world's only collapsing trade bloc. And in the medium term, there are huge opportunities for us.
The Eurozone and the EU economy as a whole is growing, so I think that statement is incorrect.
Over the last 10 years, it's the only one that hasn't grown.
Let me ask you another question. You have described the NHS as the biggest 60-year mistake. Why, therefore, can the public trust leave campaigners when they don't even want the NHS to be in public hands?
Well, I said that the mistake was having a completely nationalised system rather than a pluralist one, such as they have in almost every industrialised country. But I mean, the referendum is an instruction to the government to get us out. Voting leave does not mean that you're electing the Vote Leave campaign. It means that you're giving the government a mandate to get us out on terms and within a timescale that is fair to our friends and allies across the Channel, but in our interests. And so, in a way, all of these questions about, where does Boris stand on farming subsidies or whatever are irrelevant, because we're really looking at a decision to leave. And we're asking people not to trust any other politician, but to trust the British electorate. That's what this is about.
But the weight of economic evidence and forecast is on the Remain side. I think you would admit that at least.
No.
Can you name a country that has access to the single market but does not accept free movement?
Oh, loads. I mean, the EU just signed free trade agreements with Peru,
Hold on.
Colombia.
There's a difference between a free trade agreement and the single market.
Yeah, you said access to the single market.
Yes, but
every country in Europe
to the single market.
has access to the single market.
Yes.
There is a free trade area from non-EU Iceland to non-EU Turkey. They all have access without tariffs.
Why, therefore, does Ireland and Norway face agricultural tariffs of over 13%?
Sorry, Ireland and Norway?
No, Iceland and Norway
yes. Iceland
face
and Norway,
agricultural tariffs.
Iceland and Norway have very wisely chosen to stay out of the common agricultural policy.
So that their farmers face those sorts of tariffs?
And their farmers are strongly in favour of staying out of the CAP. And if we did the same thing, instead of being doubly penalised as a net food importer with efficient farms, we're paying more into the CAP than anyone else, we're getting less out of it than anyone else, we could have a British farming policy tailored to suit the needs of our own farmers, and it would benefit our consumers as well.
You were recently in Northern Ireland, and you suggested that if we leave the EU, that the border would remain open between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
And it would.
Right, OK. So how, therefore, can you guarantee that if you want to stop free movement, that European migrants wouldn't come through that border?
Well,
you're leaving the back door open, aren't you?
Illegal migrants could come through that border today, but don't. we have had a common travel
they could come through
area.
legally because they wouldn't have to be
We've had a
checked
common
at the
travel
border.
area which includes the UK and Ireland, which are in the EU, also includes the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands, which are not in the EU.
But it wouldn't be stopping
long
free movement, would
predates
it? That's
the
my
EU.
point.
But the point is, it's possible now. I mean, don't take anyone's word for this. As a matter of observable fact, we have a common travel area now with EU and non-EU states. No one either in Dublin or Westminster is suggesting that that should
Given
happen.
that
All
more
right,
migrants
I'm going
came...
to stop you there because we've only 3 seconds to go. Be tough on time, in interest of fairness. It's now the turn of Emma to be cross-examined. Dan, you have 5 minutes to question Emma. Off
Thank
you go.
Well, Emma, as you know, the EU is not a settled dispensation. It's undergoing the Euro crisis, the Schengen crisis, the migration problems, and it's evolving. What would you say are the greatest risks of remaining?
Well, you would keep your job, Dan, which you
That's
seem to
the-
want
you think
to
that's
lose.
the only risk? You
No,
seriously think
you
that's the
seem
only
to
risk
want
of
to
staying
lose
in?
your job. I don't think that there are great risks of us remaining because I think we have the best of both worlds. We are not in the Eurozone. We have the pound as our currency, like 8 other member states retain their own currency as well. But we have unfettered access to the single market. And there's no other country around the
but I
world
was
that
asking
has...
about the risks. I mean, what can you tell us what our budget contributions will be 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if we vote to stay?
Well, I know what our budget contributions are today, and they're not what's
I'll take that
emblazoned
as
on the side of your bus.
Can you tell us how many migrants might be resettled here under the
More
new scheme?
migrants
5
came
or
from
10?
outside of the EU than inside the EU.
Okay, I'll take
in
that
the
as
last
another
few
no. Can you tell
years.
us how many bailouts we might be dragged into if we vote
Zero.
to stay in? So you're absolutely confident that if we vote to stay in,
There's
we
an
can't-
arrangement for
even
that.
though we had a written guarantee in 2014 that it wouldn't happen and we were dragged into the third bailout, you're absolutely confident that you can trust the Eurocrats when they make the same promise this time?
Are you a Eurocrat? Because, I mean, you say Eurocrats, but you're an MEP
No,
and you
but
get to vote.
I asked the question, sir.
Yes, that's true. So I don't think that we are run by Eurocrats. I think that MEPs like you and our ministers who go to Council of Ministers meetings, who win overwhelmingly 97% of the votes in the last 12 years, I don't think we're run by Eurocrats.
But the point is, I mean, you can't really answer any of those questions about how it might look if we stay in, right? So there are risks both ways. Do you think it's safer for us to take back control so that we can mitigate those risks ourselves, or do you think we're safer passing control to people who may not have our interests at heart?
I don't know why you as a Eurosceptic mistrust our European partners to such a great extent, because actually the challenges that we face, as I said in my video, in the 21st century, whether it's climate change or cross-border crime and terrorism, they are challenges that we share with our European partners.
Well, let me ask another question. I mean, we have in this country and you're an example of it, a very high-minded, radical tradition that has been very good at dispersing power away from oligarchs to the general population. As an heiress to Wilkes and Payne and the suffragettes and the Chartists, do you feel comfortable backing an elitist, anti-democratic project where supreme power is wielded by people who are immune to the ballot box, where we have to pay more to wealthy French farmers than to poor African farmers, and where we've inflicted joblessness and misery on tens of millions of working people around the Mediterranean while Eurocrats fly around in private jets? Does Emma feel comfortable as a person on the centre-left lining up with those policies?
I feel comfortable because I think the EU has been a force for good in terms of employment protection for workers in the way that a Conservative government never has. I feel comfortable because we elect our MEPs and we elect a government that sends ministers to Brussels who have the final say on European regulations. And I feel comfortable as an MP in our British Parliament that over the vast majority of policy areas, whether it's health, housing, education, policing, we have competence in those areas.
So Lord Rose, leader of the Remain campaign, says vote Leave and we'll get higher wages. Paddy Ashdown, also on the Remain campaign, says vote Leave and we'll get cheaper food. Don't you think there are benefits to the majority of low and medium income people in this country from having that boost in household income?
On the contrary, I think it is...
So they're wrong?
No, I think they are wrong.
Yeah.
On the contrary, I think it is people in my own constituency and low and middle incomes who will suffer the most if, according to the Brexit economist Patrick Minford, our manufacturing is eliminated if we leave the EU. If, according to the Bank of England governor, who has predicted a recession if we leave the EU, it will people be on low and middle incomes, the people I represent, who will be worse off, not people who are earning high-income jobs.
What do you think is the strongest argument for voting Leave?
I don't think there is a strong argument for
Do you
voting
think there's
Leave.
any at all?
I don't think there is a strong argument for voting Leave.
And you see, I think this is one of the things that puzzles a lot of people
1
who are trying
minute.
to make up their
But
minds.
then you don't think there are any
You guys-
benefits of us staying in the EU?
Actually, do you know what? I can see arguments on your side.
Can you?
It's not my job to tell you what they are, but I can see them. But what is extraordinary to me is that people who think of themselves and make an issue out of being so broad-minded and reasonable really struggle to see that there is another point of view at all. It just can't put themselves in the shoes of the people who the EU is not benefiting, which is the vast majority of people in this country.
Well, I think there's a lot of scaremongering on your side about, if we stay in, what might happen, because actually if we stay in, we'll pretty much have the status quo. We'll have access to a market which we trade more with than the rest of the world. 44% of our exports go to the rest of the EU. The weight of economic opinion and the weight of business opinion is that we should stay, and our trade unions, who represent more than 4 million of working people across the country, also think we should stay. So I'd rather listen to them than you. Thank you very much.
And do you think that the European Union is a growing, successful scheme that people would join today if we were not already?
Well,
in
the
it?
European Union economy and
Yes
the
or no?
Eurozone economy is growing, yes.
All right, that's a yes. We end it there. I thank you both for that.